Hello, and welcome to the audio recording of Flawed Dogs by Berkeley Breathed, read by Molly Ray. Chapter 2. Up. 3 years before, in another time and another place, late August. Heidi McLeod sat in the last row of the airplane as it taxied toward the small terminal and looked out the left-hand side window, changing her life forever. Years later, she suggested to other people, whose lives were on the crummy, hopeless, dead-end path, that a good thing to do was look in the direction exactly opposite of which you were going to look. Catch life by surprise. If she'd been seated on the right side of the plane, she would have only seen fat green hills dotted with fat cows. She would have wondered if cows attacked. She would have seen the elegant sign over the terminal door greeting visitors. Piddleton, Vermont, home of the world's most beautiful dogs. Oh, brother, I don't belong here, she would have said with a grimace of remembrance. A single word would have occurred to her. Run. And she would have dropped her bags the moment she'd left the plane and made a dash in the direction of Fiji, where she'd read somewhere that 14-year-olds were considered fully grown and could legally lie around the beach their entire lives eating fruit roll-ups. But Heidi didn't look out the right side window, because back in St. Paul, Minnesota, the nun of St. Egregious Home for Troubly Girls had strapped her in row 40, on the left. They assumed correctly. It was the furthest point from the cabin door on the right, and she'd have trouble getting to it when it occurred to her somewhere over Indiana that a pleated skirt might make a decent parachute. So it was the left window that she pressed her face on and looked down. A dozen dog crates were stacked on the tarmac. Each had a shipping label. Like boxes of tomatoes, thought Heidi. They had just been offloaded from the cargo compartment of a large plane, waiting to be picked up by their new Piddleton owners. Each held a different kind of dog, the world's most beautiful dogs, all of whom were sleeping or looking stupidly at the air molecules going by. Except one. The dachshund looked up through the chrome bars at the young human female. "Ah, they've got you too," he said aloud. The girl's face pressed against the glass of the airplane above him. He sighed and added, "Your crate is better." The dachshund knew almost nothing about people. He knew the rubber boots of the one that used to clean his kennel and bring him kibble, but he had never spoken to the man. The last 3 hours in the plane only added to his life experience of plastic shipping crates, the smell of jet exhaust, and the sound of turbine engines. And now a new young human face was looking down at him. He stared back. As he stared at her, she stared at him. 50 feet and millions of years of evolution separated them. The sight of the human girl inspired the first murmurings of a primordial dog instinct rumbling deep inside his dog's skull, and a single thought slowly rose to pop in his dog brain. "I want," he said, "one of those." Suddenly a much different face filled the cage openings, peering through the bars 1 inch away from his nose. It was much older and rounder, and smelled of perfume, hairspray and broccoli and bacon quiche. It squealed, "My handsome boy! My handsome boy!" A large, squarish woman in a hairy blue chinchilla fur coat and hat unlatched the cage door and pulled the young dachshund out, holding him up high for first inspection. She rolled up her coat sleeves and stretched his torso, arching his back, while one hand clasped his muzzle, holding him high. She examined his backbone, neck, shoulders, forehead, rump, teeth, eyes. Did they align perfectly? She cocked her head, closed one purple eyelid, and sighted down his nose. "Gorgeous! Just what I ordered! Straight and true!" she purred. She squeezed the dog's thighs. Heidi watched from inside the plane above. She had seen holiday shoppers inspect something else in the very same manner. What was it? A Christmas ham. On an instinctual level, the same thought occurred to the dachshund. "No, no, don't eat me, furry human!" he cried out, but the vise-like fingers held his mouth shut. His eyes could move, though, and he could see that the large woman must have fallen down the stairs recently. Her lips, nails, nose, cheeks, and eyes were discolored into horrifying shades of purple. He shuddered at what other monstrous hues might glisten on her other, unseen parts. Suddenly the woman froze, her eyes locked on the top of his head. "Good "Lord and holy butter, the cranial Douglas tuft," she said. A shaking finger reached out and touched a wisp of fur curling from the point on top of the dachshund's skull. Pierre Douglas was an 18th century Austrian breeder who died without fulfilling his life dream of producing a lime-green colored dachshund. Instead, he left behind a highly prized genetic abnormality that forever carries both his name and his eternal shame. A little curly wisp of hair atop the head. For the large woman in the chinchilla coat, it was the holy grail of dachshunddom. She spun around and faced an airport man in white overalls behind her. She thrust the dog into the man's face. "Look! The Douglas tuft! The Douglas tuft!" "My name is Douglas," thought the dog. "Oh," whispered the great woman in an ecstatic gargle growl of awe. "This one will finally win me the Winmister Championship." The man rolled his eyes. "Mrs. Nutbrush, as usual, you'll have to wait until his shipping papers are processed. You can pick him up in cargo in a few minutes." "Well, there it is," Mrs. Nutbrush said, and with a flourish placed the dog back into his crate. She bent down and put her face to the bars. "Mommy's little world champion!" She smiled broadly, but the dachshund noticed she wasn't looking at his eyes, but rather his tuft. "Beautiful!" she purred. "I'll be back for you, sweet pea." She loped off. Bounced, really. The dog stood in his crate, dazed at her words of doom still ringing in his ears. "I'll be back." He looked the other way and saw a green ocean of grass in the distance. It rippled like inviting waves. Waves a dog could run through forever. Then he looked down to the latch on the crate's bars. In a crisis, dogs can be simple in their thoughts. In this case, he just had one. "Out!" He tried to unhook the latch with his teeth. They weren't reaching. Tongue. Use the tongue. He wrapped it around the strange loop of metal and yanked sideways. Hard. Harder, he muttered. Slippery, stupid. Come on, old Douglas tuft. Get a grip on it. Out! 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 As he struggled in panic, his eyes happened to go up to the window of the plane opposite, where the young human female's face still peered down at him. He couldn't hear, of course, but she was mouthing something behind the glass. "Up," she was saying. "Pull it up."